The church stood adorned in flowers and white ribbons, the air thick with hope and gossip. Daniel, the groom, sat tall in his wheelchair, carrying the weight of his past with dignity. Claire, radiant in her wedding dress, walked down the aisle with hesitant grace, her smile faltering under the watchful eyes of the town. Whispers stirred the silence. Was this a story of love's triumph, or a cruel illusion waiting to shatter? No one knew the storm about to unfold. The church bells tolled, their echoes spilling across the sleepy town, pulling people from their homes like a summons to history. Every pew was filled, faces glowing with anticipation. Women fanned themselves, men straightened their collars, children swung their legs, all eager to witness the wedding spoken of for months. It was not just a union of two souls. It was the talk of the town, the spectacle everyone craved. At the altar, Daniel waited. He sat in a wheelchair polished to a shine, the navy suit pressed against his lean frame. His hands gripped the armrests, not from weakness, but from steadying the storm inside him. The accident years ago had stolen his legs, but not his spirit. He smiled, a smile of quiet pride, of love that had endured doubts and whispers. His mother, seated in the front row, watched him with eyes brimming with both pride and fear. Then came the sound everyone had been waiting for. The organ swelled, and Claire appeared. Her gown shimmered beneath the stained glass light, every step graceful, every movement rehearsed. Yet, beneath the veil, her eyes flickered, not with certainty, but with something unsettled. Some saw it, others chose not to. Gasps echoed softly as she began her walk, and all at once the whispers started. "Do you think she really loves him?" Someone murmured. "She's marrying a cripple," another hissed, barely a whisper. "Or maybe she just wants his family's money." Daniel heard nothing but the pounding in his chest. To him, she was a vision, the promise of a life he never thought he'd have after the accident. He imagined her hand in his, imagined the vows they would exchange. For a moment, he allowed himself to believe that love truly had triumphed over cruelty, that he would finally be seen for who he was and not for what he had lost. But Claire's steps slowed as she drew closer. Her smile faltered, her hand trembled against the bouquet. She glanced sideways, catching the eyes of friends who smirked knowingly, their unspoken judgment heavy in the air. Daniel's gaze searched hers, seeking reassurance, seeking the warmth he had clung to in late-night promises. Instead, he found hesitation, like a candle flickering in the wind. The priest cleared his throat, ready to begin. The hush that fell was deafening. The entire town seemed to hold its breath, waiting for vows, for a union, for a story to tell. But beneath the quiet, something dangerous stirred in Claire's heart. Something no one, not even Daniel, could see coming. The priest's voice carried solemnly across the hushed church. "Do you, Claire, take this man?" But Claire did not answer. Her fingers tightened around the bouquet, knuckles white, breath uneven. Her gaze darted across the room to faces smirking, whispering, waiting. Then slowly she turned, not to Daniel, but to the guests. I can't do this," she whispered, her words trembling, but clear enough to cut through the silence. The room stiffened. Daniel's hopeful smile faltered. Claire's voice grew louder, sharper, as though fueled by the weight of hidden shame. "I cannot marry a man, broken and bound to wheels." It was as though lightning struck the church. Gasps erupted. Some clasped their hands to their mouths. Others exchanged knowing glances, and a cruel ripple of laughter traveled from the back pews. Daniel's chest tightened. The world blurred around him. His hands, once steady, now gripped the wheels of his chair until his knuckles burned. "Claire," his voice cracked, fragile and small. "After everything." But she shook her head, tears spilling, though no one could tell if they were born of regret or relief. "I deserve a whole man," she said bitterly, each word dripping with poison. Daniel's mother broke then, clutching her son's hand with trembling fingers. Silent tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "My boy, my poor boy." The priest stood frozen, unable to speak, while the church swirled in chaos. Murmurs rose, cruel remarks twisted the air. "She's right," someone muttered. "He's less than a man." Another snickered. What bride wants a burden for life? Daniel lowered his gaze, his face burning with humiliation. Every dream he had cherished shattered before the eyes of the town. The wedding that was meant to redeem his life had instead destroyed it. He felt smaller than he ever had, drowning in the very place he thought he would rise. Then, quiet footsteps echoed, a new sound, steady and defiant. Heads turned. Down the aisle walked a woman no one recognized. Her dark eyes blazed, her stride unwavering. The laughter died as her presence demanded silence. Daniel lifted his head, confusion and faint recognition flickering across his face. She looked at him not with pity, not with judgment, but with fire. And as she reached the center of the aisle, her voice rang out, low yet thunderous. Enough! Enough! The single word echoed across the church like thunder after lightning. Every head turned toward the woman standing in the aisle, her figure cloaked in simple traveling clothes, a striking contrast to the satin and lace around her. Elena's eyes burned with conviction, and though no one knew her name yet, her presence demanded silence. She walked slowly forward, the sound of her footsteps louder than the heartbeat of the room. "You sit here laughing," she said, her voice clear and steady, "while a man's dignity is torn apart before your eyes." The congregation shifted uncomfortably. A few tried to look away, but her gaze swept them like fire, leaving nowhere to hide. "I knew Daniel once," she continued, her tone softening but no less fierce. "I saw him after the accident that tried to break him. I saw the nights he refused to surrender, the mornings he rose despite the pain, and while others pitied him, he carried kindness in his hands, strength in his silence, and courage in his heart." Daniel blinked, recognition dawning in his eyes. The memory of Elena, a fleeting friend in his hardest season, washed over him, fragile yet undeniable. Claire, still holding her bouquet, scoffed lightly. "And who are you to speak here?" "This is my wedding." Elena turned to her, eyes narrowing. "No, this is Daniel's humiliation, staged for your escape. You call him broken, but it is your heart that is crippled by cruelty." Gasps spread like wildfire. A few guests who had laughed earlier shifted in shame, their cheeks red. Even the priest lowered his eyes. Elena stepped closer to Daniel, her voice trembling now, not from weakness, but from truth. "This man deserves more than mockery. He deserves loyalty, respect, and love that sees beyond scars and wheels. And if this town cannot see that, then perhaps it is not him who should be pitied, but all of you." The church went silent. Even the children sat frozen, their fidgeting stilled. The weight of her words hung in the air, pressing against every chest. Daniel's head lifted slowly, his eyes glistening. For the first time since the cruel betrayal, he felt seen, not as a burden, but as a man. Elena's final words cut the silence. "Today, your pride is on trial, and Daniel's dignity will not be buried here." The doors slammed as Claire vanished into the daylight, her dress dragging like a ghost behind her. A silence followed, so deep it pressed against the walls. All eyes turned to Daniel, waiting for his collapse, his shame, his undoing. Instead, Elena moved. She stepped closer to him, her voice low but unshaken. "If she would not stand by you," she said, "then let me." Gasps rippled through the pews. The audacity of her words struck harder than Claire's betrayal. Yet in her gaze there was no pity, only conviction. Daniel's breath caught. "Elena, you don't have to—" "I choose to," she interrupted, kneeling slightly so their eyes met. "Not to save you, but to stand with you." The priest hesitated, clutching his book. "This is highly irregular," he murmured, his voice trembling. The congregation leaned forward, torn between outrage and awe. "Was it not irregular?" Elena countered, her voice ringing like a bell. "For cruelty to be allowed here, in this house of God? If vows mean truth, then let truth be spoken." The old man faltered, then slowly nodded. "So be it." A hush swept the church as Elena took her place beside Daniel, her hand resting firmly on his. Together they faced the altar, no longer as outcasts, but as equals bound by choice. Daniel's voice trembled at first, then grew steady, carrying through the vaulted ceilings. "I have been called broken, less than a man, but love is not measured in steps or strength. It is measured in loyalty, in kindness, in the courage to stay when others run. Elena, if you choose me, know that I will spend every breath proving that what I lost does not define what I can give." Tears streaked down faces across the room. A woman who had laughed earlier now buried her face in her hands. A man who had mocked Daniel lowered his head in shame. One by one, the congregation rose, not in scorn, but in reverence. Elena squeezed his hand, her own vow clear and fierce. "I do not stand here out of pity. I stand because you are more whole than any man I have known. And if love is a choice, then I choose you, today, tomorrow, and until the end." The priest's voice broke as he declared them bound. Applause erupted, not polite but thunderous, shaking the rafters.